Wow, you guys, do you remember these CDs? And they're actually connected to one of the coolest and most amazing miracles that God has ever worked in my life. Stay until the end because the end twist is going to completely blow your mind. One thing that I've learned is that although we say that God is a God of last minute, He's actually a God of every minute and every second. But most of the time, we wait until the last minute to see Him. And I experienced this about 15 years ago when I started attending church. One of my cousins who makes music put together a CD, back when CDs were still a thing, and he was giving them out to friends to help sell, kind of like Girl Scout cookies. And he came to me and he said, "Shervin, can I give you a few CDs?" And I said, "Sure, why don't you give me 10 and let's see what happens." And I remember he was so disappointed. He's like, "Shervin, you know so many people, only 10?" And I said, "Let's start with 10 and then I will ask for more." But unfortunately, of the 10, I could only sell one copy. Just one. My business partner's friend came to visit the office, and I asked him if he'd be interested to purchase one, and he said, "Yeah, sure." So I sold it to him, and that was the only copy that I was able to sell. Now, when my cousin came back after 3 months, he said, "All right, Shervin, how many did you sell?" And I told him, honestly, just one. And he was, again, so disappointed in me. And I told him, "Sorry, man, look, I wish I could have done more. I tried." Now, fast forward about a year later. This is evening time. I get a phone call from that same cousin, and now his voice is shaking. And he says, "Bro, you are not going to believe what just happened." He tells me that he and his buddy were racing down the street when a police car pulls them over. And his buddy, who is trying to become a police officer, he's a cadet, gets this brilliant idea to just flash his card and pretend to be an actual police officer, which is illegal, as you can imagine. When the officer sees this, he immediately pulls them both out of the car. I think he handcuffs them and has them sit down on the curb, and he starts yelling, saying he's going to throw them in jail and make sure that the friend would never become a police officer because he's such a liar. So, needless to say, they are both in complete shock. They're in panic mode, and they think that their lives are going to fall apart. And then the officer says, "Pop the trunk open." So he starts searching to see if he can find anything illegal. And there's nothing illegal, just clothes and a box of CDs. He picks one up and he says, "What's this?" And my cousin says, That's my music, officer. I made it." And the officer looks at it and then looks at him and says, "Are you lying to me again?" And my cousin says, "No, officer, I'm not lying. I'm a musician." And that's when the officer says something that neither one of them expected. He says, "Do you know Shervin?" And my cousin says, "Yeah, he's my cousin." And that's when the police officer says, "About a year ago, Shervin sold me one of your CDs." That one copy that I had sold was to the police officer who had just arrested my cousin. The police officer was my business partner's friend who had come to visit the office. So the police officer let them go, and he tells them, "Stop pretending to be police officers, slow down when you're driving, and say hi to Shervin when you see him." That night, my cousin called me in tears, and he was so thankful that I had sold that one CD. He said that that one CD saved their lives. And we were both so thankful and in awe that the one thing that felt so small and insignificant had made such a huge impact. So, my friends, that moment reminded me of something that I will never forget, and I want to remind you as well, that God is so faithful even in the small things. So let's always be grateful for the little things. Yes, even in the disappointments, even in the rejections, because you have no idea how God is going to use them later and multiply them in ways that you could never even imagine. God bless.